how many were, probably best to ask, how many were not on FRAMs? Okay, so most of you guys were on FRAMs, right? How many know the difference between a FRAM 1 and a FRAM 2? All right. You do now? All right, we're gonna get into that. Before we start though, I've got a question. It's something that came up with Tony and I just talking, and it's really about our library. How many engineers in here? Snipes. How many snipes? All right. Some of you may remember this, the propulsion operating guide for the ships. Every ship had one except Tony's apparently. This is from the USS Buchanan DDG-14, and for you guys who are not snipes, it gives all the diagrams of the plant. I just want to show you what we recently got in here at the library. We got the 1920s version of that from U.S. torpedo boat destroyers, which they used to call destroyers before they were destroyers. They were torpedo boat destroyers. These are two actual that were donated by tin can sailors, and this was by a gentleman, Daniel Bleshore, donated it. Or perhaps, I don't know Daniel, but perhaps his estate did. We, as you all know, we receive a lot of stuff that's donated to us. So just keep it in mind, no matter what you might have, these are machinery guides for torpedo boat destroyers, but they're priceless because they're for real, they're original. So if you have stuff like that, keep us in mind. Keep us in mind. All right. I think everyone has probably seen this slide here. Enough for about half an hour. We're going to talk about FRAM destroyers, which so many of all of you. I never served on a FRAM destroyer. We had one. I was in a destroyer squadron staff, Desron 5, in 1976. We had the last active duty FRAM on the West Coast. There were a couple that were Naval Reserve Force, but we had the last active one that was USS Agerholm, the one whose claim to fame was firing the only nuclear depth charge as a real, for real. But that's as close as I came to a FRAM destroyer. Anyway, FRAM, for those of you, careful, not this. Only three Fletchers were formally FRAMmed. Only three. And there were 175 built during the war, as you can see. Framing really started in 1958. As you can see, the Sumner class followed Fletcher. Obviously, we all know that. And gearing is the long hull, the stretch Sumner, really. What FRAM 1 meant, FRAM 1 was designed to add 7 years, officially 7 years to the life of the destroyer. In fact, it actually added twice that or even more to the life of a destroyer. FRAM 2 was designed to add 5. There was actually a FRAM 3 on the books. The Navy never FRAMmed a destroyer to FRAM 3 because that only added 3 years, and they figured take a ship out of commission for a year in order to give it 3 more years wasn't worth it. So they never actually did a FRAM 3. But if you're seeing Jeopardy some night and they ask what a FRAM 3 was, you'll know what it was. Excuse me. And you can see the number. There were 33 Sumners and 78 Gearings. But this is an interesting one, and this came up with Ray here. 16 of the Gearings got the FRAM 2. And the difference, and you'll see in a few minutes, one of the major differences is between the FRAM 1 and the FRAM 2 is the FRAM 1 got the ASROC launcher between the stacks. FRAM 2 did not. Here's some more trivia for you. You know, our Arleigh Burkes are DDG 51 through DDG 124 now, I think. This is DDG 712. This is the GAIAC, the very first guided missile destroyer. A lot of people think it was DDG 1. Well, it became that. But for 1 year of its life, it was DDG 712, which was its original hull number. The Navy realized that it was a significant to have the very first DDG, so they redesignated, same ship. And you can see it's a twin, these were Terrier missiles back then for you missile guys. Twin Terriers. Oh, no, this is, no, she didn't get ASROC at all. This was, I think she was a Sumner, so she wouldn't have gotten anyway.
She's a Gehring.
Yeah. I'm sorry?
She's a Gehring.
712?
Yeah. 710 was the Gehring.
Oh, you're
711 was the green.
you're right, BJ. You're
GA
correct.
green.
Right. I think, I'm not sure of this. I think though, in 1962, I think she reverted back to a FRAM. They finally FRAMmed her, got rid of the missiles and all that.
Previous slide said that. Your previous slide.
Oh, it did. Yeah, after the missiles were removed, yeah. Okay, now, between 1945 and 1958, it wasn't like it was dormant. A lot of change happened to destroyers. Anyone own a DDR, radar picket destroyer? Okay, did you have this big height finding radar board? Yeah. Yeah, great big rocker. What ship was that?
I was on the Fisk for cruise.
Fisk, okay. Okay, so this was between the end of the war and 1958 when they started to FRAM. They were converting to DDRs. This happens to be the Goodrich. DDEs, escort, not a destroyer escort, but an escort destroyer. They took DDs and they converted, and what you can see here, there's a weapon alpha here and here. Weapon Alpha was a rocket-thrown anti-submarine death bomb, basically. And it was apparently a maintenance nightmare, so it didn't continue. And they got rid of, if you'll notice, its guns are 3-inch 50s, not 5-inch 38s. Here's another one of, this is the Aaron Ward, kind of a famous ship, not kind of a famous ship. There were 12 Sumners were destroyer mine layers, and if you'll notice way down the bottom, all were retired by the end of 1950. None of them underwent FRAM, and not a single mine was laid during World War II by these ships, even though they had 80 of them aboard. They spent the entire war with the mines just sitting on them. Just a little sidetrack here. Aaron Ward was hit by a kamikaze during the war, almost sunk. And the story, and I think at some point we might write it up for the Tin Can Sailor. But the Aaron Ward was saved only because of the heroic, I mean almost miraculous damage control of its own crew. They saved the ship. He was towed into a Espiritu Karima Reto, I think, off Okinawa. It was patched up just enough to get it underway on, I think, one engine. They steamed it back from Okinawa to Guam, to Hawaii, to San Diego, through the Panama Canal, and all the way up to New York City in order to have it repaired. And when it got there, a bureaucrat with a clipboard walked aboard and said, "Nah, we got too many destroyers, we don't have to repair this one." These are the guys who gave their lives to bring it all the way around, and it was just stricken, bang. Who knows how many men died saving this ship that could have survived if they had just abandoned it, but they didn't. Anyway, that was the Aaron. Now, we talked about single, how many gunners in here? Gunners mates. Okay, you got 5-inch 38 single on the Fletchers, 5-inch 38 twins, and the The Gearings with the 3 twins had 6 guns. Fletchers had 5. They always argued, you know, I've got 3 mounts, but I've got 5 mounts, and back and forth, back and forth. Look at this one. 4 mounts. What destroyer is that? It's not a Fletcher. It's not a Gearing.
4 twin mounts?
4 twin mounts.
It's gotta be a gearing class.
Gotcha. Now, it's a pre-war, pre-war. It's the USS Porter, which predates the Fletcher. 4 twin, and she was, at the time they called her a destroyer leader, although she wasn't even as long as a Fletcher. Tiny ship, but so there's some trivia for you too. There were ships with 4 twin 5-inch
A
38s.
rough rider.
Hmm?
She must have been a rough rider.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. But it served well throughout the war. The entire class served well. They greatly upgraded it during the war with, but they kept the 8 5-inch guns, but they added all kinds of anti-air because of the kamikaze problem. Okay, now we get to Fletchers. This is the USS Foote. She was torpedoed, as you can see, but not sunk. It was repaired. I just want to show you. This is the. You've got 5-inch 38s, and there are 3 of them back here. Of course, this is the original configuration of the Fletcher.
Torpedoes?
Yes, torpedoes. 2. Here's the. This little bump you can see here is the protective enclosure for the people manning the torpedo. And the reason that was there's another 5-tube torpedo set right here without the enclosure. These guys were in the open. These guys were protected, and they were protected because of the blast of that Mount 53, because it was firing right over the head. And here's another look at it, and you can see this better. You see the 2 torpedo mounts, torpedo mounts, and that's the enclosure with the 5. This is the classic Fletcher. Notice it's a really early, no radar to speak of other than a small surface search. This one, the reason I use this one is because of this. It holds the Navy's record for 30 battle stars. 16 World War II, 5 for Korea, 9 for Vietnam. Presidential unit citation. Anyway, very
Hugh,
effective.
I've heard that a lot of the old photographs of Navy ships
Like that.
had the, they were photoshopped to get rid of the
Yeah.
radars.
Yeah, the sensors took that out. I believe though this is so early that this is so early in the war. But you're right, it could very well have been. But usually you would see a mark on the bottom for the sensor. You'd see some kind of official publication. All right, any questions about any of this so far? Stop me anytime you feel like it.
You. On that radar, I think they put the radar when they had the tripod map.
Good point. You're going to see that right here. Yeah, that's true, because that little stick mast to support that heavy radar that you got.
Yeah.
Now this, I'm going to go back here. Here's the original Nicholas, pre-FRAM. Okay, and Nicholas, I chose that one because it's one of the 3, only 3 out of 175 that were FRAM. And you can see the difference. She's only got 2 5-inch 38s remaining, weapon Alpha, the anti-submarine warfare, and most noticeably the dash deck. These 3, I didn't say that on here, but these 3 ships, the 3 Fletchers that were FRAMmed were all done in Hawaii, by the Naval Shipyard in Hawaii. They were all stationed there. They did them, and finally the Navy said, "Oh, time out. The ships are just too old." They were, because Nicholas was there from the very beginning of the Second World War. It was pretty well worn. Okay, so that's the visual difference between the same ship, pre-FRAM and FRAM.
2 antennas up there?
Now, I'm going to show you this again. This is another Fletcher class DDE. Now, this is not one of the FRAMs, but this was an evolution of the Fletcher class between the wars. You notice that she's got weapon Alpha here. Now, the only reason I'm showing you the base, I have a friend who was on the base, and I want to show you this base is at her proudest here this evening. And here's base on the rocks in Greece, in Rhodes, Greece. My friend was an ensign. He stepped aboard the ship from the motor whaleboat in the afternoon. That night, he hadn't even unpacked his bag in his stateroom. That night, the base drug anchor for about a mile. The captain was ashore rather, somewhere in here in a restaurant, and he watched his ship drive past him and go aground. There's a slight difference between these two, to show you some more of the evolution. Go back to the base here. Right here in the boat pocket area, it's kind of wide open. Years later, they had added the Mark 32 triple torpedo tubes. But that's just an evolutionary thing. As you can see, she was stricken in place, dismantled, sold to a Greek company for scrap. Anyway, 1968 that was. Okay, now we're into the Allen M. Sumner class. This is as built. And you can see that this is a classic Sumner because it is the Sumner 692. You got 1, 2, 3, 5-inch twin 5-inch depth charges, K guns here, 3 on each side.
Torpedoes?
Torpedoes between the stacked, right? There and here. And this also has that after torpedo mount has the enclosure because of mount 53 firing right next to the guy's ear. So that's built. So just keep that picture in mind there. Here's a classic FRAM. FRAM 2, the Huntington. Anyone on board the Huntington? You're on Huntington. Okay, good. Coincidentally. Is this how you remember her?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And of course the thing here, Huntington had the VDS on the fantail. Do you remember the VDS on the fantail?
Yes. Yeah.
For those of you, maybe snipes who are on ships that had a VDS on the fantail, it's the thing you leaned against when you're catching the smoke. Now, that's a mark of the FRAM 2, the VDS from the fantail. So I researched and I tried to find a blown up, a big picture of the VDS so those of you who have never seen one. Well, I found one, but I'm a little hesitant here to show it. How many of you remember going through a Navy course? You're back from lunch, half the guys in the class are falling asleep. And what does the instructor put in the slide presentation? What's he put in there? Miss January, right? Right, Miss January. Well, unfortunately, the best VDS picture I could find has a beautiful woman in it. So, if this will offend you, please turn away.
We can handle it.
And I said, give me a warning. I'm giving you the warning. I'll let you make it your call. All right, here's the VDS. I mean no disrespect for this unidentified woman. Apparently this photograph was taken probably by her son, who was, had her down for the day. Mom, come on down and see my shit. Anyway, sorry to lead you astray. This is the John A. Bolt, and if you look closely, this is what the VDS, you can see it took up the entire fantail. It just took over the whole thing. This is the fish itself. It has the vertical stabilizer, but it also had the horizontal and it's just like an aircraft, like an aileron on a wing in an aircraft. That's how you made it dive or ascend. Where's Steve? You had the VDS on the fan kit.
Yes, we did.
Is that the way you remember it?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
What does VDS mean?
Yeah.
You,
All right.
what does VDS mean?
Oh, I'm sorry. VDS is variable depth sonar. How many sonarmen are in here? Come here, come here.
Oh,
Do we have any sonarmen here?
you lost the
Okay,
pick.
a couple sonarmen. Well, for the rest of us here, one of the problems we had as I'm sorry, what I'm doing is I'm fiddling with this thing. One of the problems we had as surface ships is our sonars were always at the surface. Right? The submarine knew that, so you just get below a layer, get below a temperature layer, because the physics of sound in water, as you pump out a pulse into the water, if you hit a boundary, it will bend upward. Right? And the submarine, all it has to do is get below it. And of course, the submarine had the advantage because his sonar was down there already. He could hear you. So what we decided to do is we had to get the sonar down, way down. So we put the sonar in this variable depth sonar fish, put it in the water, and reel it out to the depth. BJ, can you have me right behind? It's very heavy. It's the back of the
It's funny sentence or this is pretty heavy, so we have
Those of you who might remember this BT. This is the old. This is the old bathythermograph, right? This is the old BT, and what they would do is, but this one was towed. It was a towed thing. The sonarman would put it in the water, send it down, and as it went down, it would, on a slide in here, it would register the temperature of the water as it went down against the depth of it. And they needed that in order to determine where these thermoclines were. And you feel like, I'm not passing it around. Somebody's going to drop it on their toe. Well, later on, they decided that was a pain in the butt, so they created a thing called the XBT, expendable bathythermograph, where you would drop it. And one of the ships of the battle group would be, that day would be the XBT drop. And he would drop it and then report to everybody what the layers were on the way down. The whole purpose of that was to determine, with more modern sonar, they're much longer, much further in range than they used to be. So anyway, that's what the VDS is, to get it down in those areas to try to catch the submarine maybe below the layer.
You also needed that for air support, because the aircraft could drop sonobuoys, and they needed that information in order to make them most effective.
Yeah, to where the transducer stopped, yeah. That's a good point. If you had a LAMPS helicopter, for example, aboard, or any ASW helicopter, the H-3 from the carrier, for example, sonobuoy in the water drops a transducer down, and you want it to drop down to where you want it to go, and they do need that information. Yes, sir.
I was on deck one night on duty, and we launched one of those things. We told him to slow down, we'd launch it. He didn't slow down, we cut the cable. He
Really?
snapped the cable.
They snapped it, or?
He snapped it, we lost it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I was on, I was XO in the Fanning, but it was a Knox-class frigate, and we had the VDS different, ours was internal, and we let it out to the stern. But 2 o'clock in the morning, or 4 o'clock in the morning, the watch is being relieved on the bridge, and the officer deck relieves the watch, and off they go. About 2 hours later, sonar calls and said, everything going blank here. Is the VDS, where's the VDS? And the guy said, the officer of the deck said, VDS? We have VDS? Dragged it across the mountain. Dragged our VDS fish, and it left. And our VDS fish was about 3 times the size of that. It stood about this tall, big thing. Captain was pissed.
No, I don't understand why.
You couldn't take a joke, that's what.
All right, any questions on the VDS?
You said on the FRAM 1 and the FRAM 2, the big difference was the ASRock,
Right.
but no FRAM 1 had VDS.
I couldn't find any FRAM 1 with a VDS on the fantail. Did any of you have a VDS on the fantail or a FRAM 1? Yes, sir.
No, FRAM 2.
I don't believe there were any FRAM ones that had VDS.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think that's what differentiated, the FRAM 2's got the VDS, the FRAM 1's got the ASRock. One of the problems with VDS is your detection range was really enhanced. You could really pick out a submarine a long way off, but you had nothing to shoot it with on a FRAM. You didn't have an ASRock to put it out there. And everybody said, whoa, whoa, you know, so you had to be with someone else who could attack it.
FRAM ones also had the SQ-23 pair sonar, and the FRAM 2s did not.
Good point. Part of the, well, some got paired. Some got the paired was the two domes. The 23, the straight 23 was, the FRAM 1 got the upgrade of the sonar. The FRAM 2s had the SQS-8, I think it was, something. They kept their old sonar, right?
How did the expendable communicate with the ship? Was it still connected by wire or?
Yeah, it was connected by wire. Did you do XBT drops as a sonarman?
Not XBT.
No. Anybody do XBT
Yeah.
drops?
Yeah. You just had a thin wire on there.
Right.
And then it just basically spooled out.
Right.
Okay.
But it's transmitting as it goes
Yeah,
down.
it's transmitting as it.
Right, yeah. And then it just leaves. I don't know what they cost. It was probably a couple of $100 a piece, I guess.
What was the launch recovery time for a VDS?
For this one, I'm really not sure.
Representative.
I know you had a maximum speed you could tow it at.
Yeah.
And that was, I think, around 10 knots. Do you remember? It was about 10. Yeah, 'cause Steve
Never
was
went over
a,
10 knots.
yeah, because you just, you know, it became unusable above that.
Because once it's deployed, you're pretty much limited in what you can do.
Right, right. You are, for sure, yeah.
No sharp turns.
Yeah, and you, yeah, shades of,
Captain Queeg.
yeah, there you go. But later on, when they really perfected VDS, the VDS, it was an active sonar also. It was better as an active sonar than it was, but active sonar went away. You didn't want them pinging away because they could hear you around the world. They could hear you pinging. So what they used it for, on my ship, they modified the VDS, and on the tail, the upper tail, they put a connection, and we towed 1,000 feet or 1,000 yards, 1,000 feet of what was called TACTAS, Tactical Towed Array Sonar System, TAS. And that was a passive array that you would tow out miles behind you. It was just passive. And but the TAS ships who didn't have VDS towed it from the surface all the way down, where we were able to put it down in a layer and then tow it straight out. But once you got down there, we could tow it. We could tow it, and they could use it up to about 10 knots, maybe 12. Where the TAS people, these were 1,200 pound. This was the 1040 class, 1,200 pound destroyers, destroyer escorts, who were towing this thing, and they couldn't go above spare steerage weight, 3 knots, 3 or 4, and then the sonarman would lose it. They would not be able to hear anything.
DE 1022 was one of the first ships to be fitted with ITAS.
Oh, really? That was a Dealey class, right? Yeah.
Lester, right?
In fact, we have a Dealey sailor here.
John Willis had that on the back of their fantail too.
All right, well, any other questions about the
But that was
VDS?
only the 15 tail that,
I'm
it
sorry?
was the 15 tail that you were limited to less than 5 knots.
Yeah.
When they came out with the 18 tail, which went on the Knox class,
Right.
you could go up to about 10 to 12. The problem was,
Yeah.
you went up too high, you created too much self-noise.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why they called it tactical towed array sonar, where the original was just TAS.
Yeah.
Was it 15? I don't remember.
Yeah, it was 15, and they were mainly on the Garcia class.
Garcia, right,
Yeah.
right, the 10
Yes.
foot, the 10
And
foot.
then the launch class had the 18 tail.
All kinds of games.
Some of the later ones had,
Yeah, we detected.
like mine, you know, it got modified. We didn't have BDS on mine. And they modified, so it was just like the 19 tail that was on the ferry class.
Yeah.
Which were neutrally buoyant.
Right, yeah, yeah. Yeah, you had, it was like a glycerin
Yeah,
liquid that was inside it, yeah. It was, but to answer your question about how long it took to deploy them, you had to come to, you could maybe 3 knots, 4 knots, and you started putting it in the water. And then you had to put the tail all the way out. Once the tail was out, then you put the VDS in there. So it took a while. It took a while.
Yes, when we were deploying with our BDS, we dragged it over the Nautilus, over the sail,
Yeah.
and laid her over and just got them all excited.
Did you leave a mark?
happy there either.
No, it didn't damage the fish at all, so.
No, I'm talking about the submarine.
No, yeah.
Yeah, who cares?
Other than just the stuff that's stuck on the inside of the sun.
Yeah. That's one way to catch a submarine, is hook them.
Yeah.
All right, let's say goodbye.
I wonder if that ever happened. They thought that's submarine.
Okay, gearing class, original configuration. The only real difference between the gearing initial configuration and the Sumner was 14 feet in here. 14 feet of all fuel tank. And the reason for that, of course, was the Atlantic was a third the size of the Pacific, or even less than that. And they just didn't have the legs. So they very quickly added 14 feet of fuel to increase its range. But its armament, its engineering plant was the same. There wasn't much difference. BJ's comment about, I didn't mention it, the tripod mast, and you can see the tripod mast, you just had so much weight up there. You lost the mast pre-FRAM.
Batteries.
Yeah,
We lost the mast, all the lifelines, the shields around the gun mounts on the O1
Yeah.
level, crushed like they were paper.
yeah,
From there, we went into dry dock for 9 weeks. We were heading to the Mediterranean.
yeah. And your
And
mast just went
I
over,
was
right?
down the engine room with my legs wrapped around a pole. They couldn't get me off that thing.
Okay, so that's original, the Shelton, 8 battle stars for the Korean War, 8 for Vietnam War. 8 battle stars as an original configuration, 8 more as a FRAM. Roman, and this is a better look from above. You can see the 2 guns. What they did is, this is the difference, the ASROC here between the stacks. Those of you're all familiar with the Joseph P. Kennedy here in Fall River. She's a FRAM 1. And very distinctive with the dash hanger. All right, any questions there? Here is I was mentioning this to someone. This is the Bryce Canyon. Oh, by the way, for you Fletcher guys, this is an original configuration Fletcher on the other side of the pier. And that's USS Callahan. The picture really is to demonstrate the difference between the Sumner and the Gearing. These 3 ships, the Swenson, the Collette, and the Blue, are all Sumner. You can see there's no ASROC launcher. Right? But what you can really see is the length. All 4 forward stacks are lined up, but only these 3. Look where the after stack is on this thing. So 14 feet in here. And what you see, this is the ASROC loading crane right here, between the right after the ASROC. So that's the difference. That's the visual difference between them. Any questions about it?
They said, for that 14 feet, they said that the gearing was rolled better than the Sumner.
Oh, did?
Sumner was heavy
Yeah.
with the 3 mounts.
Well, was Gearing faster? I don't. If you ask a marine engineer, they would say it must have been faster because it's the same breadth, but a longer length. And one of the factors in a destroyer speed is this length versus breadth ratio. And with the same power, the same breadth, longer length, it should have gone faster. Of course, that doesn't take into consideration how much heavier it was too.
I was on both a Gearing and a Fletcher. The Fletcher was fast,
Oh, Fletcher was fast, yeah, yeah,
of course.
right.
Well, as in what top speed?
There's claimed top speed.
Yeah.
I've heard say Fletcher 45 knots. There's official top speed, what the designers designed it for. Fletcher was like 34, 35,
There you go.
but you could push it higher than that. Like the Knox class, you were on Knox, a Knox class? 27 knots. If any Knox couldn't do 27 knots, you were hurting. You could, I was chief engineer on one and XO on another one. Each of those we pushed over 30, but not 35 or 38 like some guys say.
I saw the Lowry do 32, which was 770.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We used to have carrier escort, and we used to do like 33 or so, and the whole darn ship would be shaking.
Oh, yeah. Well, it'll let you know it's doing it.
Yeah.
We would try to do plane guarding with the carrier, and I would try to keep one boiler. We were 22 knots on one boiler. Some ships pushed it to 24. I didn't do it.
You?
So what we would do, we would wait for the carrier to turn, and then I'll catch up to you on the way back.
We would go out on a full power run. We'd get 28 knots, and then we'd be in port for 3 weeks fixing all the boats.
If you were on a Fletcher and they could only do 28 knots, you could do that on 2 boilers.
It was sick.
Yeah.
I was in have a problem signing the FRAM 1.
Pardon me?
She was 25 years old, I had her up to 33 knots.
33, yeah. And it's really, when you get to that point, when the ship is that old, we had the Aggerholm. Aggerholm was commissioned in 45, and she was still active in 77, decommissioned shortly after that. They had her up on a full power run, but for a full power run, you would do your 4 hours of full power run to meet the absolute requirement, even though you knew you could do better. But as soon as you finish your full power run, you'd always ask the captain, now can we go up? And you'd see what you can do. But yeah, 33?
Yeah.
33, yeah.
The other thing they did on FRAM 1s was you had a cruising turbine on there.
Yeah.
Okay, so, you know, if you set it into whatever it was, you want to cruise at 15 knots or so, you could maneuver a couple of knots above and below that.
Not much, no.
But, you know,
Yeah.
but that was another way they kept fuel economy in there and
Right.
extended its life.
Right. But not all the gearings had the cruising turbine though. The Joseph P. Kennedy does. If you get down there, she's got a cruising turbine. That's that extra wheel on the throttle board down there. But they did take it off about halfway through the construction.
Yeah, when they converted some of them to FRAM 1s, some lost it, some kept it.
Right. But I think some of them, even on new construction, they said, okay, let's just take that out. Because some of them, as built, were just high pressure, low pressure turbines. But that's a good takeaway point here. There were so many ships. You saw 175 Fletchers, 33 Sumners, 75. That was a lot of destroyers in the Second World War. I'll bet you there weren't any two that were identical. Somebody had little more 20mm guns. Somebody had an extra twin 40. You know, they were putting stuff all over them as the war went on. Engineering plant stayed pretty much the same though, as built. Thank God, because the Fletcher guys could go right aboard a Sumner or Gearing and pick it up pretty quickly.
The big change.
Hugh, why would they take the cruising turbine off of those destroyers?
Well, it was the only time you're going to use it, as you say, it's almost like an overdrive.
Overdrive,
Yeah. Once but destroyers didn't cruise. You know, if you were with a battle group, you're being sent here and there. You never used it. The only time you would use it is if you were crossing the Pacific all by your lonesome.
Okay.
And you could set 15 knots and keep it for 4 days.
Or when you were doing your annual fuel economy run.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you're right.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but in day-to-day practical usage, it just wasn't used, and it became one more piece of machinery that was just sitting there deteriorating. I think that's, personal reason, I think that's personal opinion.
The other major change on the FRAM 1, when they framed them, they put in what was called a turbo line, okay, which came before the auxiliary steam stop on the boiler.
Yeah.
And what it meant was that you could run the turbos. There was a separate line that went to the turbo generator.
Sure.
So you didn't have to come in on the main.
Yeah.
Okay, and I said it was before the main steam stop, not the auxiliary steam.
Yeah.
So you could run the turbo on that. It was designed for when you're sitting either at anchor.
Sure.
Or on.
Sure, auxiliary steaming, yeah.
Auxiliary steaming.
Right.
Yeah. And that was modified when they went into FRAM.
How big deal? I didn't realize, thank you, I didn't realize that. I can't imagine having to be on the main just to run your generators.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what, like on the Knox class, that's what you had to do.
Yeah.
By the way, who's our captain on the Patterson that I was on?
Oh, Captain, pleasure to meet you. Good. All right, any questions on this? Just remember, now you've seen it. You've seen how much actually longer they. All right, now you've seen the FRAMs. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you just pictures, like 5 of them, of maybe 6 different FRAMs, or pre-FRAM. The reason I'm doing that, I'm showing the ships that our FRAM volunteers, our group. This was, Dallas is having cataract surgery today. He's normally the one who does the drawings, but he's having cataract surgery. This was his ship. And if you'll notice, Weapon Alpha, and there's hedgehogs here and here on both sides. They're fixed hedgehogs. If you'll notice this model right here, let me use the little laser here. This little model right here, it's got, in place of its mount 52, this is a DDE, and in place of mount 52, it's got a trainable hedgehog. These were fixed. So it's got a single hedgehog, so you're going to fire it. If your submarine's over here on this ship, you got to fire at port. Forward, you got to turn. So that's a trainable hedgehog there. All right, so that's Dallas. That's Dallas's quartermaster in the 70s. Here's the USS John Hood. Yep, Jerry's ship. In keeping with Jerry's advanced age, it was pre-FRAM.
So wasn't my wife. It was.
And you can see it's a classic FRAM. Here is the single pole mast that you're talking about. And she does have radar up there, but little tiny one. I'm not sure where this was. I initially thought maybe this was coming into San Diego, but she was an East Coast ship, right?
Right, but
Because it almost looks like North Island Naval Air Station and Point Loma going out. But
we lost the mast in '56. So it had to be before '56.
yeah, probably was. Yeah.
Probably in the.
And Jerry was second class machinist mate, 55 to 58 on that ship. Okay, next one is the Ingraham, which is Steve's ship. And you can see BDS down here, back here on the fantail. And you hear the term short hull, long hull. Short hull is a FRAM 2. Short hull is the Forrest Sherman, Alan Sumner class. And that's Steve's ship, bosun mate seaman 62 to 65. Bory is another of Dallas's ships. He was on 2 FRAMs. I don't know who this tender is. I tried to figure that out, but I couldn't. And Kepler, where's that? Okay, this is Al's. Al was on 2 ships. Kepler 1 as a FRAM. Third class gunner's mate 70 to 72. Okay, Douglas H. Fox was Peter Pacheco. Believe it or not, we have 2 cataract surgeries going at the same time. Peter, our good friend. This is something that I think we've talked about before. He was aboard the ship very during the war. shot down 7 kamikazes. Peter came aboard right at the end of the war. In 1947, they were in the Adriatic between Italy and all the Albania and all those guys there. They hit a leftover German mine, buckled the stern, and killed 3 men, injured 11 or 12. Peter tells a story. He was back there right at the place where that mine went off, doing something, and his chief came back and said, Pacheco, go do something else. Send him somewhere else. And 10 minutes later, the mine goes off. He would have been one of the guys killed. But he tells a story. They towed this thing for, just imagine being towed from Venice, which is where they had their emergency repair, from Venice all the way around to Boston under tow, 1 month at sea, 1 month under tow. And what they did is they grafted, as you can see, I use the term grafted, they took the stern of a ship. It was either a damaged ship from the Second World War of the same class, or it was one that was, right at the end of the war, they ceased construction on a whole bunch of destroyers. And they took the stern off this other ship and grafted it onto the Douglas H. Fox, and Fox continued to steam until in the mid-70s. She was framed later on, much after Peter. And Miles C. Fox, which is Dave, Steve's brother Dave. This is his ship. This is a good view of they took Mount 52 off, and you've got the 2 triple tubes, Mark 32 triple tubes. And you can see the ASROC control station, and in front of it is the ASROC loading crane, and spare, or the ASROC magazine really is back in here on this side of the dash hangar.
Hey Hugh, didn't they call the area back there the secondary con too?
I'm not sure. I think secondary con. I'm not sure. Anybody know? I think it was up here.
Yep, you're correct.
Yeah, right there. Yeah. Some early ships, secondary con was if you go back and look at some of these torpedoed boat destroyers. The captain would stand back there with the helmsman. You'd have a big old helm back on secondary con. All right.
So that would have been above the DesVets magazine?
No, above the dash hangar.
Yep.
Yeah, but on Patterson and on Kirk and Fanning, it was just back there with the binnacle and all that. All right. And Newman Cape Perry, which is Al's second ship. That was a Newport ship, right? Newman Cape Perry. They completed, coming off the gun line, they were told to do it around the world. They came back, instead of this way, they came back that way, around the world cruise. We had the opportunity to do that on the Fanning. It would have gotten us into port like 3 or 4 days late, coming into San Diego. We presented it to the crew. Of course, all the guys in the wardroom wanted to do it. Yeah, let's do it around the world. We're going to go to Australia. We're going to go there. And then I said, well, let's take a poll. Phew, shot it down. They just wanted to get home.
Maybe it's a Democratic ship.
Yeah. Well, I thought for sure it would. One of the chiefs came to me and said, "Well, we ought to ask the crew." And it wasn't and I said, "Well, I know what they're going to say. Sure, let's go to Australia." So I said, "Go ahead." Yeah. Boom. Right on the jaw. I want to go home. All right. All right. That's any questions at all on the evolution of the FRAM? Yeah.
And I voted for.
Oh, Hedgehog. No, you didn't. Hedgehog was a. I don't have it. Let me see if I can go back.
On the ship over here, you got one?
Yeah, if you look at the model here, the position, Mount 52 position, what they were 24 rocket thrown. They were about this big. Yeah, you had a big bulb explosive on the end, a tube, and then a fins on the back. They would load them onto these spikes, and you'll see and when they would fire them, they were all slightly offset so that when they landed, it would be in a big circular pattern. And it would only landed a couple hundred yards from the ship, maybe I don't know. Do you remember, Captain, what a Hedgehog was in the? 1,000 yards, maybe at most.
Probably so. I didn't serve on anything.
No, all I know about is what they tossed it from the historic school, and
And,
yeah.
I don't even know if it was 1,000 yards because.
Yeah, it's pretty short. I've seen a lot of photographs of how, but it would hit in a circular pattern, and they would drift down, nose down, and they were a contact fuse. If they didn't hit the submarine, they weren't like a depth charge which had a pressure fuse that set it off at a certain depth. These were contact, and if you hit it, and it would go off. It was a pretty good charge. Have any of you been to the USS Slater in Albany? Okay, if you go to Slater, Slater has a great hedgehog display with fully loaded hedgehog, and they're loaded with a Japanese movie company made those. Did you see
Yeah.
They used the Slater in a movie. We never saw the movie. It was a Japanese movie. They came aboard and they used the Slater, and they wanted to, and they went back and they manufactured. They look precisely like hedgehogs, the charges, and they're all made of fiberglass. So if you get to Albany, I would really recommend it. See the Slater.
Japan won the war in that movie?
What's that?
Japan won the war in that movie.
No doubt, because that's what they teach them. Yeah, woulda, coulda, shoulda. Yeah, hedgehogs. We're from the Second World War all the way through. In fact, my daughter's father-in-law, who was long passed away, had a destroyer escort during the war, and some of his photographs show the charges going like sequence, going up, coming down, and then hitting the water. And,
Yeah, the Brits developed it.
was it Bridge?
Yeah, the Brits developed
They
it.
developed a lot of stuff. The magnetic mine, well, Germans developed the magnetic mine, but when I give the tours on the battleship, down in the engine room, you have the degaussing equipment is in the engine room, only because the engine room is big enough for it. And so I tell them that the ship was designed in 1942. Just a year or two before that, the Brits discovered this strange thing laying up on the beach and had drifted ashore, and it was a magnetic mine. They had no idea why these ships were inexplicably sinking as they were coming into port. Well, they had laid magnetic mines, and which sensed the ship's magnetic signature, and boom, went off and broke its back. Well, they took this mine that had washed up ashore, carefully disassembled it, and they figured out that it had a magnetic exploder in it. So the counter to that was the degaussing system that all ships have now. And if you look at some of the original degaussing, when they degauss ships, they actually strung cables around ships and send them to sea with the cables there, makeshift generators, water generator sets on board to provide power. But now all ships have degaussing just for that reason.
We got your book, Doyle.
Yes, sir.
You didn't talk much about Dash.
Well, Dash, yeah, it's like if you got a kid who goes bad, you don't talk much about it. Family reunion,
I flew.
Yes.
I was a Dash officer.
Jim, you got the floor. Tell us about Dash.
It's a great design feature. The Boeing aircraft engine ran like a charm. The biggest issue was the electronics, which they're still tubes. Okay, that's how old they were. Trained at Dam Neck, Virginia. We had one crash down there into a sand dune. Got aboard the ship, the Fisk, up here in Newport. And the control station, if you've been on board the Kennedy, when you're standing in that control station and you land that drone, there are counter-rotating blades with 6 pounds of lead weight with a metal fin, 1 to keep the blades level, 2 to increase or decrease the speed to change the direction. When you landed, that 6 pounds of lead at 600 miles an hour was 6 feet in front of your eyeballs. I had trouble landing.
Glasses, you'll be fine.
Oh yeah, I had a helmet too. We had trouble landing one afternoon, and the captain came down off the bridge, and he stood next to me. So I deliberately walked it in and put it down 3 feet in front of his eyes. He never came back to the fence here. I don't understand.
I've heard all kinds of stories about just going over the horizon and just gone.
Oh yeah, you could swap control to CIC, and then you could send it back to the control station on the deck. That swapping never really worked.
Right.
I lost 3 of them. The last one went up right over the after mount at 6 o'clock in the morning. It's in 13,000 feet of water 10 miles north of San Juan Harbor Light if you want to find it. That's another thing. They had a airbag on it that if it blew up or whatever and went into the water, this airbag was supposed to hold up the engine and whatever other components. Airbag never worked.
Maybe it's staccato.
On the crossing the Pacific on the Westpac cruise, on the Lowry, we had dash, and the CO decided that he wanted to set the record for continuous hours deployed. And when you recover one, you had so much time to get the second one in the air to qualify, right? Well, it just so happened while this was going on, the first division officer and ensign decided to have a saltwater washdown.
Oh!
And somehow the control box, now you say you could transfer control between CIC and the control box?
Correct.
Well, I don't know what happened, but because the control box got wet, they couldn't recover it. And what they noticed was, if I remember correctly, it was 270 relative. That's where the dash was when they lost control. So the inclination was to steer in that direction. What they discovered was, as soon as they did, it maintained 270 relative. So they could never catch it.
Doing this.
And I'll never forget the image of the guys, the drone guys, or the dash guys, and that first division officer using ship air blowing out the control box so they could recover the dash. And they actually recovered it.
Oh, they dried it out?
They did not lose it.
Wow, wow. Now, I just said, I was saying earlier, I was a plank owner on the Incheon. Had nothing to do with Dash. I was a main propulsion system. So Incheon is a helicopter carrier, LPH-12. And one of our very first jobs after we were commissioned was to take Nav Air and their contractors and I forget who manufactured Dash, but all the Dash engineers were out there, all these civilians, on the flight deck with 12 Dash helicopters all lined up, and it was the swan song for Dash, 1970. They were trying to save the program because Lamps was coming on. You know, the Lamps helicopter was coming on, and I don't. So we're all up there like buzzards on the bench, you know, up on the superstructure, watching this fiasco go on, and the professional Dash pilot, the civilian guy who worked for the company, crashed 3 of them in a row. And they didn't even get 200-300 yards from the ship, shunk right in. And the scuttlebutt was that on the plug, that like a cannon plug, or what do they call it, the gang plug?
Yeah.
That 2 of the pins were reversed. So every time he tried to go right, it went left. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what they told us.
The helicopter had a internal gyro, which you slaved to the ship's heading before launch.
Yeah.
So you knew that when you pushed the control stick away, the drone went away from you, pulled it left is right, right is left. What happened in many cases is as soon as you launched, the gyro on the helicopter would spin out 180 degrees. So instead of pushing away, it actually came towards you. Right was left, left was right.
I'll bet you that's what happened. Yeah.
Now try to land it, and when it gets right at the deck level and it hits the deck, it finally says, oh shit, I'm 180 degrees out.
It wants to spin around.
It wants to spin around on deck.
Well, if you're going to land it and it's going to, when you go left, it really goes right, just get a mirror.
Yeah, right.
No.
Watching it through a mirror.
No.
I gotta tell you.
Not
one about
happening.
Then we lost
Vietnam, we
like
had
that.
modifications to our drone
We lost
helicopter,
2.
so we could
Well,
send
I'm
it
not
over
sure.
land
It went up,
and rescue a
flipped it out.
downed pilot.
Next thing you know,
Al, wait a minute, Al. Hold on a second.
It had a jungle canopy penetrating seat that would unspool down, and if the pilot was desperate enough, the thought was he would get on that seat and he could be lifted up and brought back to your ship.
How many were saved by that?
None.
If I'm a pilot, if I were down there beat up for a month waiting to be rescued, and I saw a Dash come over, I'd say, I'll get the next one.
That's the next post.